How can we always know what is the next step we should take? That's what we're going to talk about today. Hi, this is Jill from the Northwoods talking about motivations for your life, how you can get things back on track one small step at a time. I often think that we get overwhelmed, and I talked a few weeks ago about taking a pause, trying to stop getting overwhelmed. But one real important thing about where we're going in life is that we get overwhelmed. We have too many goals, too many responsibilities. The world is coming at us very fast. But we can get some peace when we shrink everything down. That's the whole idea behind small steps. Start with small steps. I used to be that person who got overwhelmed, and someone said to me, they said, it's like you're walking around with this cloud over your head of everything you need to do in your life, and it is overwhelming you. What you need to do with college, what you need to do when you're thinking about where you're going to work in your future. This is when I was in school. What you need to do about your family, what you need to do about your weight, what you need to do about your budget, And to me, they were right. It was this giant ADHD cloud hovering over my head. And all the time I was thinking about everything all at once. It's kind of like that movie, Everything All at Once. Oh, yeah. Anyway, and then you start thinking, oh my gosh, you'd read books. Oh, you need a 5-year plan, and you need to have all these checklists, and you have to have a full-blown structure in place. Now, some people are very good with that. And now that I've been, gone through some project management classes, and I worked, I mentioned a few weeks ago, at a company that was insanely hard, that fired people at the drop of a hat. And it could have been disastrous for my life. But what it actually did is it taught me to be better. It taught me how to step things up and to have full-blown plans. I had a project where it was going to be a server, and it was a server that was up for 15 years. And we were thinking about, do we hand out, back in the old-fashioned days, you had tokens. You had these little tokens, and they gave you two-factor authentication. Now we have it all on our phones. But I was going to have to send it out to every user. And I had to come up with this 10-year cost of me sending a token to every user. And the tokens lasted every 3 years. And it taught me a lot about planning. But it is a way to get overwhelmed. First of all, if you're not very good at it and you're kind of new to whatever it is you're trying to do, you can get overwhelmed about these things. And so it took me a long time before I could handle extravagant plans like that. The honest thing is you just need one step. Progress is not made with grand leaps. It's about taking the next faithful, small, thoughtful step. Start with small steps, right? That's the whole name of the podcast and video. When you get overwhelmed at work, oftentimes, if I get overwhelmed and, too many things came in at the too fast. Okay, Jill, just think, what's the next thing you need to do? And I would look at the things I had to do. What's the most important thing I need to do? Well, I have a meeting coming up tomorrow at 2:00. I need to get that agenda out so everyone's ready for the meeting. I would be in trouble if I didn't have an agenda for the meeting. That's the next most important thing. Then the other thing is I owe someone an email. I better get that out. Instead of stressing about everything all at once and everything I have to do, what is the next thing I could do? Or if there's not something that is immediate, like my agenda that has to go out for the meeting, is there something that would make everything else better? If I could get this one thing done, everything else would be made better by it. And that was a little bit, I had a project that was last week, and it had a deadline. It was important because if I didn't get it done, people wouldn't be able to log into hospital software. And it had, like I said, a deadline. It all had to happen at 8 p.m. on Wednesday. End of story. So we had all the pieces. I had to get that done. And so that was very clear to me what next thing I had to do. What about when it comes to your health? Would it be more important for you to get out and go for a walk than it would be for you to worry about the perfect diet? Is that the thing? Now, for me, I had, during the pandemic, cleaned up my eating. I noticed that the people who got the most sick on COVID were the people who were really overweight, and that's when I decided I'm gonna fix it. And so I had cleaned up most of my eating. I was reducing my portions. I was eating about 1,400 calories a day, and I was eating things that were real food. I got away from processed food. So it had to be something that I would find on a farm that, before I could eat it. Now, maybe it was a farm in California, like avocados, but somewhere it came from a farm, right? It was real food. I didn't need a chemistry. So I cleaned that up during the pandemic, which was fine because, that meant my grocery shopping was a lot more simple. And to be honest, processed food can be very expensive. So natural food or real food can be much cheaper when you do that. So for me, I was no longer at that point where cleaning up my diet was the next best thing. What was Jill lacking the most? What would be the biggest bang for my buck when it came to my health? And that was exercise. I had to get my exercise. Every single one of my hobbies is sitting. I knit. I'm trying to teach myself how to draw. I do podcasting and YouTube videos. I'm a computer nerd. I would love to play video games. This room is a testament to everything I love doing. And you know what? It is sitting. I have my comfy chair back there. I have my reading couch over there. Everything is about me sitting in this room. I had to get my exercise in place. That was the next best thing I could do. What about when it came to issues of faith? To me, I thought, you know what, Jill? I've read through the Bible, right? But let's say you come across a hard topic, something that's difficult to understand. I tended to just graze over it. Well, I don't really know what that means, but I'm sure God meant something good about it. Wasn't good enough, right? And I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to read the Bible and I'm going to look everything up. I have logo software. I have the best commentaries in the world sitting on this computer. I'm going to look everything up so I understand what it meant. Why did God say it like that? And then I said, hey, wouldn't that be fun if that was a podcast? And that is what the Bible in Small Steps podcast and YouTube channel is about. So that to me was the most important thing I needed to do for faith. Then when it came to relationships, what is the most important thing I could do? I am really terrible at keeping up with people that aren't immediately in my face. My best friend, she lives down the street. We see each other many times a week. We go to the gym together. We go on adventures hiking together. Easy for me to keep the relationship going. I mean, not to say I'm perfect with that, but for people who I don't see as often, I'm terrible at it. So I needed to work better on that. So what's the next best step you can do? And so I think the first step is identifying those things. First of all, like I said in the podcast a few weeks ago, pause. Take a breath. Notice where you are right now. What are you feeling right now? And then I tend to look at what is my biggest problem? What is the biggest problem I'm having right now? What's the next best step? My biggest problem when it comes to this house is I have, this used to be a farmhouse, and it had horrible carpet from the previous people who owned this house. And it was causing allergies, breathing problems for me. And I decided one weekend to just rip out every ounce of carpet in this house. And I found out there's beautiful hardwood floors underneath everything. A friend of mine is going to come over and offered to help me get the hardwood floors refinished. But I never have time. I'm always doing this. I'm always doing something else. And I really need to get on that, because if I do that, I maybe can get a pet again, like a dog or cat. Wouldn't that be fun? And so what's the next best thing I can do? That's the idea. And so the idea is to sort of reflect on that. What's the most important thing for me to do? I also like breaking it up into categories like I just did previously, because maybe we need to do something for our health, which is a little bit different than what we need to do for our faith, which is a little bit different than what we need to do for our relationships. So I do like having these big categories and looking at that. I mean, think about it, that when you think about like the old-fashioned sailors, they don't just stare at a whole map. They look at what the next heading is, right? That when you have someone who is like a firefighter, or think about healthcare professionals. I work for a hospital. Their first step, if you show up in the emergency room, is how can I keep you alive? And then once we've kept you alive, what can we do to make sure that you don't fall into whatever just happened to you again, right? So that's the idea. We really need to do this step by step and look at the next best action. So we're going to talk now a little bit about what you can do in order to get it. Now that we realize the next step is the most important thing. There's a podcast out there called The Next Right Thing. And I've always admired the fact of her podcast name because that's what I wanted to have as a podcast. But start with small steps is pretty good, right? So that's what we're going to do is we don't want to get overwhelmed. We don't want to sit there and say goals like, oh, I have to completely reorganize my kitchen. It's overwhelming. Or I have to write a whole book and I better get it done in a couple of months. Or I better get fit and I better get fit in the next 6 months. None of those things happen like that. None of them happen like that. And so we need to come up with a plan about what we could do. So there's a thing called decision fatigue. And decision fatigue, think about it like this. It's the easiest way to think about it. You go into a grocery store and you look and there's 200 different flavors and brands of jams and jellies. And you kind of sit there and go, oh gosh, I don't know which jelly I should get. And so then you start going through this exercise. Well, I like this brand. I've had their jelly, before. I didn't like that flavor, and so then you start going down, but then you start to try to narrow it down. Well, I like strawberry a little bit better than grape. Well, I like lower sugar a little bit better than full sugar. I like natural jams and jellies better than name brand jams and jellies. And you start shrinking that decision. But when people have decision fatigue, it tends to overwhelm them. They tend to not want to make a decision at all. And it tends to cause them to take forever to make their decision. The next important analogy I'm going to give you is that there's basically 3 kinds of people in a problem. Imagine you have a giant boulder sitting in your front yard, and you got to get it out of there. The city told you, get that boulder out of there. You're either pushing the boulder and moving it. You're sitting on the boulder, making it harder for whoever's pushing it to actually do it just by you not doing anything. Or you're pushing back at the boulder, making it impossible for the person who needs to move it. So are you actually taking effective steps to making something better? Are you making it worse just by you being inactive? Or are you making it worse by fighting back at what it is you need to do? That's where you got to ask yourself, where am I in this? So the important thing that you're going to do when you're taking a look at what it is that you're trying to do as your next best step is that you should think about, what it is, first of all, that you're having a problem with. Think about, when it comes to health, what is my number one health problem? When it comes to work, what is the number one thing I need to do? I always start out every day by writing, today will be successful if I get these 3 things, these 3 things done. And that's how I start my day. It's how I end my work week on Friday as I think about what are the most important things next week I could get done that would make everything better. And so I end my work week with that, and then I start each day thinking the same exact thing. So let's talk a little bit more about that. Certainly there is Brian Tracy who talks a lot about this kind of activities, how you can think about this, how can you structure your goal, how can you think critically about the things that are going on in your life. First, the most important thing is that you focus on progress, not perfectionism. I was always that person who had the problem that I could not clean my house unless I knew I had enough time to finish cleaning my house, which who has that kind of time? So let's say it's Saturday. I'm going to clean my house today. Awesome. And then my friend calls and says, hey, would you like to come over at noon today and we can have lunch? We'll go to lunch. And I'm like, well, now I can't clean my house today because I'm not going to be done by noon. So I would never start projects because I could not finish them in that amount of time. And it wasn't for me perfectionism as much as it was, I have to complete this. Nope. Progress. Just make progress on something. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be complete. It doesn't have to be an all-encompassing solution to everything. Just start now, and concentrate on making a small positive improvement, whatever that can be. Then try to gain momentum. Try to actually build upon that. Because, one of the things, like let's say your kitchen's a wreck, right? Your kitchen's a wreck, it's a mess, and things are all over the place. But as you start putting things away and getting things organized, it gets easier and easier and easier for you to organize them. You start building on the momentum. Or when you start losing weight and you start exercising and getting fit, you're capable of doing so much more, going on longer hikes, longer bike rides. And so you're able to overcome any kind of thing dragging you down. This idea that you will build on it. And so when you're not focusing on paralysis, but instead taking next steps, taking the next small step that you can take, you're starting to trust yourself. You're starting to build on it. You'll start seeing your path a little bit more clearly than you saw it before. And so every step will provide you with a little bit more information, a little pat on the back for getting there, and giving you new choices and new directions. And the closer and closer you to get to your goal, the more certain you will be about where you should go. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist, he always said that you should go most safely and sure-footedly along the path, he said, prescribed by your unconscious. I don't know about that, but you often know in your unconscious, and just meaning like you didn't write it down on a list. You often know at a gut level, at a heart level, what it is the next right thing that you need to do. What is it? At one point, I had problems paying my bills way back in the day. I cleaned that up. I had problems then getting organized with my bills. I cleaned that up. Okay, what's the next best thing? I haven't saved any money for retirement. Now I have. You know what I mean? So then at that point, I decided that was the next best thing. I had to put away money for my retirement, get it invested, figure out how to do that. And so as I started solving all the problems, the next problem became much easier to solve. I gave myself a little pat on the back because look at that. I have already cleaned up my budget. I already cleaned up my spending. Let's do that thing that we finally said to do where we're going to put money away for our retirement plans. So what you need to do is, like I said, first of all, you have to talk in encouraging words. If you start out with any one of your projects and just say, I suck, this stinks, I won't be able to fix this problem, I'm never going to be able to save money. And I thought that way too. I'm never going to be able to save money for retirement. And you know what? Compound interest is a modern miracle of modern economic times. It can help you catch up. But the idea is you go into this positive. I can get this done. I trust myself. I know I can do these things. I will be able to solve this problem. Maybe not perfectly, but enough so that I can do this. Then the next part is diagnose what is going on. Break it down into smaller pieces. What is the impact of whatever it is you can't do? What is it causing you to do? For me, my health caused me to get surgery. My ankles, I busted both my ankles because I just had too much weight on them. It was starting to cause a health decline in me. And once you stop being able to move, you're in trouble, right? So what problem is it causing? What kind of sub-problems do you have? Well, I wasn't eating correctly. I wasn't exercising correctly. So you can break things down into smaller steps. And like I said, we're not going to worry about solving all the problems, but can you analyze it? And then the next part is think about the advantages you have. What do you have that you could do? Well, I bought a rowing machine. I like rowing. I have that. I can do that in my house. Okay, advantage. I live next to a really nice bike and walking path. Advantage. What are some hurdles I have in my life? Well, I'm kind of a lazy person. I love knitting and I love reading and I love playing on my computer. I have to motivation. Boy, motivation is my biggest hurdle right there. So we're going to go through all the kind of pros and cons and all those kinds of things. And we're going to learn how to do that, but really give a good analysis of what exactly is going on. What is the fallout? What is happening that is causing you not to be able to get that? Like I said, the hurdles. For me, I used to work when I worked for that very hard company that I didn't have time. That company made me work 100 hours a week, and I got another job. That was the solution to it. I had to leave that place. And if you're still struggling and if you're still having problems, that you can't get traction on this, shrink the steps, cut them in half. If you said, oh, I got a bike for an hour every day, bike for a half hour every day and cut it in half until you can get it done reliably. But when you're going to do this analysis, you're going to sort of bring it into a tiny enough step so that you can celebrate small wins, progress every day. So that's our next step that we're going to do. Like I said, we're going to analyze it. What's our hurdles? What's our strengths? What do we have going for us? What do we have going against us? We're going to talk positively to ourselves. And then we're going to start today. That's the biggest thing. Someday I'll do a podcast about the Mel Robbins book. But you go right now. You don't go tomorrow. You don't go next week. Because I was always that person. Oh, I'm going to diet. I'm going to lose weight. But it is December, and December's full of Christmas times. I'm better if I just wait in January. And then January, I'd say, oh, well, it's winter. It'd be better if I waited until March. Okay. So, that's a problem, right? Because we keep pushing it off. So we have to know, what can we do today? And the last step of this, and this comes from Brian Tracy, is we have to take ownership of this. Maybe whatever problem we have, we didn't create for ourselves. My company went from being a really good company to one that made me work 100 hours a week. It wasn't my own doing. That was the boss, right? That's who did that. I did not make this happen, but I have to solve it. It is mine to solve, and I take ownership of it, that I'm going to be the person who solves it. It may not be perfect. It may not happen immediately, but I'm going to take action today, and it is mine to solve. When you do those things, that's going to help you get through whatever problem you're going to have. But like I said, don't worry about your 5-year plan. Don't worry what you're going to do next year. Don't worry about what you're going to eat at Christmas time. What can you do today, now? Take ownership of it and just make this much progress in it. So I hope that helps. I'd love to hear from you. You're welcome to email me at Jill@startwithsmallsteps. I'd like to hear how it's going for you. You can put comments in the chat channel, but start now. Don't wait. What can you do today to just make this much progress? All right, everyone. Thanks so much.